You are here with myself, MacG. Soul is here as well
Hey,
as the
hey,
Ghost
Courtney.
Lady.
Hey, hey.
Hey.
All right, so Courtney, let's get straight into it. I believe you've had time to check out the AK interview that aired last night, right?
Yes, I've had a moment to look at a couple minutes in the interview here and there, which I've found rather interesting, and I'm looking forward to discussing with you.
Okay, let's get straight into it. What did you find interesting?
Perfect. So maybe just to give you, do you know a little bit of my background and how I've arrived at this point to be talking about this?
Not at all, but I'm sure you're going to enlighten us.
Okay, perfect. So I own a company called the School of Etiquette, and we specialize in human connection. So skills that bring people together. And I mean, we've trained all the big corporates in South Africa. We've trained all the high net worth individuals around Africa. And one of the skills that we teach on is body language and micro expressions. Because, of course, when we communicate, 58% of how we communicate, or 55%, is through our body language, whereas 7% is through the words that we use.
Wow.
So it's really interesting because we're able to watch people's body language, and there is far more information conveyed through that than what they're saying with their words. And in fact, human beings lie on average 200 times a day.
Wow.
Right, so we're really good at saying what we don't mean. Now, what's interesting is that we've got something called body language and we've got something called micro expressions. So body language are the bigger movements that we see the body making, whereas micro expressions are these tiny, almost imperceptible movements that happen on the face. And they could be less than a second. And what's really interesting about them is that they happen within 0.03 of a second. So there's no way for somebody to control a micro expression. It just happens automatically.
Yeah.
And it's something that's been built up over many, many years. It's genetically wired into us. So, yes, the answer is I have seen the interview. And what are some of the questions you have?
So let's just start from, as an expert, what did you think of the interview and what did you pick up?
You know, having watched it, there's a couple of interesting moments that I've picked up. There's moments where I see sincerity, and then there's moments where I'm not 100% sure there's 100% sincerity. So it's definitely something we can get more into. I would assume that maybe the listeners would have watched it, or I would recommend them watching it so that we can chat or they can understand a little bit about what I'm actually saying.
Yeah.
And when I'm watching this video, obviously being a micro expressions expert, body language expert, you look out for the 7 universal emotions. Okay, so everyone has these. It's happiness, sadness, anger, contempt, disgust, surprise, and neutrality. So that's a whole lot of words right there. I'm going to tell you the ones that I was really looking out for here. The one was sadness. Now, I want you to think about someone that you've seen that is absolutely distraught. You can see that sadness written over their face. You see the lips curled down. You see the chin raised. The jaw shudders. You see the eyes are narrowed together. There's no question as to whether that person is sad or not. Now, obviously, sadness goes in varying degrees. Someone can be slightly sad and someone can be really, really sad. And for me, if I've looked at videos of other people who have experienced trauma, experienced loss, I see it written into their face. You see it written into the new wrinkles that have appeared on their face. Okay, so that's the one thing that I look out for, sadness. The other thing is contempt. Now, contempt is a really interesting facial expression to spot, and actually one of the easiest. So contempt is when one side of the mouth pulls upwards. Okay, so one side of the mouth pulls upwards. Now, contempt is often showed when you're having thoughts about your superiority over people. And we've seen in interesting murder cases in history when someone has lied about losing their person they loved instead of murdering them, you see the contempt come up. We call it a duping smile, where it looks like they've smiled, but it's asymmetrical. Only one side goes up.
Wow.
So that's something that I get really interested in looking for. Then we've got disgust. Disgust, like if you think about smelling a dirty shoe, a smelly shoe, you see people's nose and nostrils rise up, you see the teeth exposed. That's the sign of disgust. Okay, and that can be the signal that we don't like somebody, we don't like what they're saying, or we don't actually like what we've just said.
Yeah.
So, having had a look at this interview, I kind of looked between the start of the interview up until about 18 minutes in. So something we see there is at around 6.5 minutes, we see AK say, we said some very mean things to each other. And he shows anger. Okay, so here's the thing. When we're trying to look for proof of lying or a disconnect between what someone's saying and what someone's feeling. When it comes to body language, micro expressions, and the words that you use, they should be in time with each other. So, for example, if someone says, I'm really sad, you're going to see sadness shown on their face at just about the same time. You don't see someone say, oh, I'm really sad, and they smile. Okay, so when it's a genuine emotion, you're seeing the emotion and the words are speaking to each other at the same time.
Is that what you saw at 6 minutes in?
Yeah, so we see him saying, we said some very mean things to each other. And he shows anger. There's the furrowing of the eyes and the eyebrows. And you know what? That sounds congruent with what he's saying. You know, he's recalling, we've said some nasty things, and he shows anger. Okay, whether it's his own anger of what he said or anger from what Anele said, we still see it, which is actually congruent. We're okay with that. Then he goes on to say, and then she threatened to kill herself. Shows contempt. Interesting. Why is he showing contempt there? Okay, just something to consider. And then he says, I look around the room and I realized she wasn't there. Here, flicker of sadness as the lip goes down. That is one of the first moments I see sadness expressed. Now, something that I do want to say is sad people are often in a depressed state physically. You see limited movements, you see limited facial expressions. So, you know, I don't want to be unfair here. He is in a sad state. You see it from the start of the interview.
Yeah.
But it's only here that I'm seeing the micro expression of sadness come through. And then he goes, I looked down the street and that's where she was. Now here you expect to see sadness. You expect to see someone that's distraught, but instead you see contempt. Mouth flicking up on the one hand side. So then he goes on and he says he's speaking about the fact that he doesn't know whether it was while he was on the phone or when he went to the bathroom. So here we see no extreme emotions showed, which seems compelling. He seems like he's being genuine here, or maybe not genuine, but he's neutral. We're not seeing an extreme show of emotions on any side. And then he says, you know, I've said some nasty things. It's led to this. I understand that I need to own that. Contempt. Okay. And then he says it's not something I'm proud of, which he's in a low energy state there, which could be revealing of sadness. So he could actually be, he's being genuine. I'm not proud of this. And he reveals sadness. And he talks about going back in time. There's sincerity, there's sadness. He would like to go back in time. Now, here was an interesting point, and I'm not sure if anyone else picked this up. He was talking about, if he could go back and he could redo things. And he says, which is what I keep saying to myself when a lot of people pass away like this. I mean, what are your thoughts on that sentence? Does anything prick your ears?
What do you think, so?
On which sentence?
When he says that's what, just repeat that again.
He says, which is what I keep saying to myself when a lot of people pass away like this.
He feels like he's involved in numerous murders or people passing away.
Yes, I mean, it's a strange wording. And here's the thing. Obviously, he's been around when people pass away. I'm just quite interested. He says when people pass away, because it's his fiance, right?
Yes.
So it's interesting. It's, here's the thing though. He is in an interview. He is in a low energy state. So, it is hard to sometimes convey the correct message, how you're intending it. So obviously we can't be too hard on him. He is still in mourning, okay, and he is still grieving.
Because you know what I picked up, Courtney? I picked up a lot of times you could see him kind of like have flashbacks or try to remember what he wanted to say. It seemed like he had rehearsed this, and most of the times he was always trying to go back to kind of remember what he had rehearsed.
Yes. I kind of felt like whoever his PR agent was or his lawyer was had definitely prepped him really well for this interview. I've done a lot of media training myself. When the interviewer tried to sort of take him off the path, he said, no, hang on, let me finish on this. And then he would go back to, telling about the wonderful times that they had together. So he felt very much in control of what was going on. Now, the last or one of the last comments that really interested me, he was going through this heartfelt thing of, we loved each other, we had good times together, and he says, she was my everything. And he shows disgust very clearly, which is so, and again, we can talk about why he would, but showing disgust when you're saying my favorite person in the world was my everything is really, it's a really strange time to be showing that. And so he says, it's why I'm so heartbroken, why I'm so shattered. If you're thinking about, a loved one passing away, when you're saying that about them, shouldn't there be genuine grief written onto your face?
Instead of disgust.
Yes, or nothing at all. No, just a completely neutral facial expression. It's just interesting. Now, we could talk about maybe he's on meds, maybe he's on anti-anxiety meds. So maybe the emotions that he's showing are all subdued. And then that the medication may affect how you respond. Okay, so, it's definitely possible that he's in a grieving state. He's feeling very subdued. He's feeling very neutral. But if I was looking at this with someone, a normal person in a normal state, these would be interesting moments that I would definitely think a little bit more about.
Hi, Courtney. It's Ghost Lady here. I just have a question.
Yes.
Okay, with your experience, how do you judge selective memory loss? Is it genuine or can it be planned? What?
So here's the thing. When we're in high stress situations, when we're in highly emotional situations, our brain has a hormone called cortisol. Now, cortisol is the hormone, we call it the stress hormone. So when we're in high stress moments, cortisol spray paints the brain. And what happens in that moment is it shuts down the brain. It shuts down our thinking capabilities, our language capabilities. And it's the hormone that is often present in those fright, fight, freeze, appease moments.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, when you're walking in the bush, the next thing a snake jumps out at you, your brain has been wired in such a way that it doesn't go, oh, is this a dangerous snake? Should I move out the way? It suddenly pumps you with cortisol that tells you to get out of the way, to freeze or to run away. So when we're in these highly stressed, highly emotional moments, traumatic moments, the brain secretes cortisol, shuts it down, and it's very, very normal and very possible for us to have memory loss in those moments.
All right, Courtney. So, in a nutshell, from what you saw, how would you describe him and his behavior, just in closing?
I think there's a lot of interesting pieces here that could create further discussions on. I suppose was it him who caused it? Was it him who did it? I can't actually say just from watching a small snippet. It would require a lot more, but it's certainly interesting. And moments where I saw certain emotions, they didn't quite fit with what was being said. So definitely interesting and food for thought.
All right, Courtney. Thank you so much once again for your time.
Thank you. You're most welcome.
And I hope you're not going to watch the podcast and try to see our body language.
Nah, we've got nothing to hide. Please do it. We have nothing to hide.
Courtney can tell us on what number lie are we on? Have you finished our 200 lies for the day?
Thank you so much,
Remember,
Courtney.
people lie 200 times a day.
Yeah.
I found something.
Wow. Thank you so much,
Thanks,
Courtney.
Courtney.
Thank you, Courtney.
Thanks, guys. Keep well.
Bye.
Awesome.